Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to Star Wars Lads for this week's live stream and Q&A. Hopefully, you're all having a great Tuesday so far. We're going to talk about all the latest in Star Wars news, including the casting of Mia Goth in the Star Wars Starfighter movie. She will be playing the role that supposedly Mikey Madison was going to play, opposite of Ryan Gosling. So, we're going to talk about her casting as well as what we think of her in Star Wars, as well as the news that right now the front runners to take over Lucasfilm as co-presidents are Dave Filoni and Carrie Beck. We're going to talk about that rumor as well and take your guys' live Q&A questions. Anything you'd like to discuss, put it in the chat. Questions, comments, theories, anything you'd like to discuss. It doesn't have to necessarily be about Star Wars. It can be about any topic you guys would like to broach tonight. We're going to be on the stream tonight for about 2 hours. So, whatever comes to mind across our conversation, send it into the chat and we will make sure we get to it tonight. As always, though, the best way to get your chat guaranteed on a stream, because we go in the 2 hour mark, sometimes we can't get everybody in, send in a super chat. It helps our channel out immensely. Your support is one of the best things that we can receive on this channel, and we always appreciate the super chats. So, a super chat bumps you up to the very top of the chat. Otherwise, it is first come, first serve. The other way you can get your chat prioritized on the stream tonight is by joining our Patreon or YouTube membership programs. If you're of a certain tier and you can check the tier that is right for you, you will get chat priority access. You'll either see in YouTube, if you're part of the YouTube membership program, you'll see the ability to send us priority chats if you are of that tier. And then on Patreon, you can send in your chat. Let us know your YouTube handle on Patreon in the comments under this stream's video link, and then we will look for your handle on the YouTube chat to prioritize. You can also comment on that link as well, and we will bring those comments up onto the chat. All right, so that's all the housekeeping. Make sure you like the video if you haven't. We have more people watching right now than have liked the video. It's always the easiest and freest way to support the channel, so make sure you do so. And if you are new, subscribe. We do this every single Tuesday, talking about the latest and greatest in Star Wars news. We have some good stuff coming up for you guys throughout the week. We have our latest tier list coming out this week. It is going to be ranking the TV seasons of all Star Wars shows, including Andor Season 2. So we've got an updated one for that ranking. We haven't done that one in a really long time. I think it was either late 2022 or beginning of
Yeah.
2023. So it's been a good minute. A lot of Star Wars shows have come out since then. So that's a big update. We also have the some stuff from our lives last time edited in. I just released the Shadows of the Empire review last Friday. If you want to check that out, I will be doing a Legends Book Club for that. So if you guys want to join, I haven't put up the date yet, haven't picked a specific date, but it will be in the next few weeks. So if you want to look out for that, make sure you join for Legends Book Club for Shadows of the Empire. Rogue Planet will be coming eventually, but right now we're working on Trials of the Jedi, trying to get you that review by next Tuesday when the book drops for the public. So hopefully we can do that. But yeah, a lot of great stuff coming up on the channel. Of course, shorts every other day, Monday, Wednesday, Friday throughout the week, and then polls twice a day every day. So you can check out and vote for your favorite Star Wars characters and your favorite Star Wars movies and shows. And either this week or next week, I can't remember what day I scheduled it for, we have the beginning of some video games joining that. All right, let's get into the news tonight. And let's start with the biggest story, which is that Mia Goth has joined Shawn Levy's Star Wars Starfighter movie coming out in 2027. She will supposedly be playing the villain of the film, according to reports. So the report recently says that the movie is going to be about Ryan Gosling, who's playing a character trying to protect his child from pursuers. Goth will apparently be playing one of the pursuers, kind of leading the charge to try to capture Ryan Gosling's child in this story. She was supposedly the second choice for them. Mikey Madison was in the running. She was off for the role. It seemed like it was basically done. And then right around Celebration, we then heard that she turned down the role. So this has now changed hands. Join Mia Goth. For those of you not familiar with Mia Goth, probably her most notable thing she's done was leading the X trilogy. It's a series of horror films that had it started with X, then it was a prequel with Pearl, and then Maxine, which came out last year. She led those films and played Pearl and Maxine. So that's probably her most famous role, but she's been in a variety of other things and supporting roles and co-leading roles throughout the her career in Hollywood, including a lot of horror. So she's done a lot of that type of stuff. It'll be interesting to see her come into something that's probably a little bit more family friendly, I would assume, than most of her previous roles. But Sonic, having seen some of her other work, knowing about her career, what do you think of the casting of Mia Goth for this Star Wars Starfighter movie?
Yeah, I mean, I won't lie, I was definitely a lot more hyped when Mikey Madison was, like, rumored, right? And it was, like, an hour later, the trades were like, "Nope, she's already rejected it." It's like, "Oh, man," that I think that news had just come out right after I'd seen Anora too, so I was already, like, fully on board with seeing what she could bring to Star Wars, what, you know, would be unique about her performance, but what would be something that would, fit in with this timeline and everything. So yeah, it was a little disappointing, but I think Mia Goth can be a little bit more psychotic as a villain than Mikey can. I know we've seen Mikey in like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and all that, but it's a little bit more campy villain than it is like, okay, like here's like someone whose mental fragility is just being fully explored and trauma and everything. Like the whole X trilogy, whether or not you like it, I know that last film didn't get as great reviews as Pearl did, but still, I don't think anybody's ever really faulted her performances in that, right? So, she's had a very interesting career. I think she met Shia LaBeouf through her a couple of her movies there and all that, so, obviously, when you're with that guy too, he's got his own strange behaviors to say the least, so, I'm sure, actors pull from their real life experiences, people they surround themselves with, so, I think that's what's kinda really elevated her performances in recent years, so I am looking forward to it, I think she's gonna be fun. I don't think we really had, like, a proper female villain in any live action, right? I wanna say not really, like, maybe a supporting villain, like a Reba and all that, but if she is supposedly the main villain, that'll be pretty cool. Again, this does throw into the question, like, what sort of hero is Gosling kind of playing? Is he gonna play more of, like, the stoic, cold-faced guy that he's kinda known for from Drive and stuff like that? Or is he gonna be a little bit more funny and hilarious like Nice Guys or Barbie? Or is he gonna find something entirely new, right? Like, there's a lot of questions, but at the end of the day, they are cast because of previous performances, because that seems like something that they could transport and translate into the Star Wars franchise. So I'm looking forward to it. Not really sure what sort of villain she will play. I don't really expect her to be like a force-based villain, but I think she would have quite a lot of fun kind of playing almost like a witch or something of some sort, just something maniacal and cackling. But maybe she's trying to play against the grain a little bit. Maybe they think that she's capable of playing a little bit more of like a first order, final order survivor or something that's got their own little resurgent fleet, or just like some pirates or something. I mean, this is hopefully a galaxy that isn't just immediately being like, let's pivot to a new republic, right? Like, I would hope that this is a fractured galaxy that's like, you know what, let's try multiple different governments, different sectors, like the Jedi can travel in between and once they get started with raising the Jedi Order, but everybody's still kinda trying to figure it out, especially 5 years after. I mean, it's not really the same thing. The First Order is an insurgency. It's not like the Empire trying to really create a bureaucracy, create structure in place that the New Republic, but its amnesty program and everything kinda repurposes. This is just like, "Hey, we've destroyed full out solar systems. We're using our Death Star cannons and our Star Destroyers from the Final Order. Palpatine's coming back because he wants to like this time it's not like, "Oh, Empire," it's like, "This was just a Sith Eternal Empire," right? So, yeah, I think it'll be very interesting to see what sort of villains kinda pop out from here. I mean, we're already seeing in, like, the New Republic comics that just started, like, how much piracy and everything can definitely play a role in, like, the immediate aftermath of stuff like Battle of Endor, Battle of Jakku, so, it'll be very interesting. I think she's got the chops, without a doubt. I'm not sure she has necessarily the same depth as what we've seen from Mikey Madison. I think Mikey has kind of pulled some stuff that you're like, "Oh, wow, like, I didn't think you had that in you," and Mikey has technically played a full-on crazier villain in Scream, and I was very unnerved by that. I think what we've seen from X and Pearl and all that, it's still really good, but it's almost more of a meme than it is like, just straight up like, "Oh, this is like a villain that I wanna, like, see continue to be translated in different franchises, different stories. I wanna see Mia Goth keep on building out," right? It seems like she had almost everything there in Pearl. X for sure, but by the end, you're like, "Oh, okay, sure, that's interesting," but yeah, I think we can see some really cool things from her. I'm just not expecting her to play like a huge, crazy, like force-based villain. It'd be great if she does, right? But I don't know how that would work with a Gosling, who I don't think is playing a Jedi, right? I mean, if he's gonna be playing more of a caretaker, we've already got the templates and the tropes with Mandalorian and Grogu and stuff like that. So I wouldn't expect him to do that. It'd be a nice twist though if he's actually force sensitive or the kid's force sensitive and then the villain isn't, right? I think that it'd be kind of nice. It'd be like what we saw with the Moff Gideon stuff, but instead of him trying to build himself up with all these different injections and technologies and all that, what would just someone just a little bit more obsessed in a galaxy that's a little bit more fractured be able to pull off? So, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm just, until I see anything on set leak out there, I'm still holding my horses on any sort of movie.
Well, I think she could play a great villain, and I do immediately, just because of her trend with horror in the past, immediately go to something a little more supernatural, but I think she could play any sort of role. This really does give me Mandalorian skeleton crew vibes the more we hear about this show. And I'm wondering if, like, for those people who are like dying for Skeleton Crew season 2, if maybe goodwill towards Starfighter could ever get Skeleton Crew season 2 greenlit in the future. And obviously would have to take place far away from where we were in Skeleton Crew season 1, because the kids will be much more grown up by the time that film comes out, but maybe it could happen. But yeah, I think this is good casting. Mia Goth has been good in everything I've seen her in. She is that type of actress who she has a striking look. So I think in that way, she's used that to play a lot of kind of creepy characters. And I mean, a witch, a night sister, or something would be really, really cool. I don't know if that'll actually happen. I get kind of pirate vibes as well from the description of the film. I do feel like Ryan Gosling and his kid are going to be force sensitive. Like, I feel like they're going to be trying to elude people coming after maybe force sensitive people. Maybe that's a way you tie in Ray, as she kind of helps save them and brings them into the fold. I mean, could you imagine if Ryan Gosling became like a kind of pillar of whatever they do in the future?
That'd be
Like a
crazy. Yeah,
and a lot of ways you could treat him in that like Kyle Katarn Corn Horn vein, where you take him and you make him a guy who's like there for all the big stuff, but on the side adventures that Ray's going on, he's kind of doing his own thing. He's not beholden really to the Jedi Order, but he is part of it when he really wants to be. And that's kind of how they treat Corrin and Kyle in most of the EU material. So I could see that. I mean, there's been rumors already that he is Corrin, and it could actually work with the timeline. That could absolutely fit. And so they could just tie that EU stuff right in. But yeah, I think this is something that could absolutely work. She is an actress that she's a character actress in a lot of ways. She really molds to her performance. It's not she's not the type of person that you see Mia Goth in every single time she plays something. You see her mold and change to whatever role she's given. It's just oftentimes she's given a lot of very similar roles. So we'll see where and what style they have her playing. I don't know if necessarily like her as some pirate lord or something works in my mind until I see it, but I see her as somebody who could have some type of cultish like group that's maybe going after a force sensitive who they're trying to indoctrinate and bring a part of their cult. I think with Palpatine gone now officially, right? Unleash the dark side, right? Unleash the dark side cults. I think that's could be something that could come out of that. And it's something we definitely do in the EU is once Palpatine's like gone, then they go more into all these different other groups who use the dark side to give the Jedi a darkness to fight, but they're not Sith, right? And I'm still kind of for that. I don't need it to, I mean, try to make them as unlike Sith as possible, in my opinion. Try to not make them Sith and red lightsabers and all that stuff. I'd rather them go really weird and different, but I could see her a part of something like that. if this is really, I mean, this is our soft reboot for Star Wars, the sequel trilogy, but also the sequel side of Star Wars, just the continued perpetuation into the future of Star Wars. If this is, yes, so planned to be a one-off movie, but I'm sure they have hopes that it could be more. I think they're going to start trying to connect and build bunch of different threads, but while also maintaining the fact that this film will be very much so isolated into its own story with limited cameos and stuff like that, but maybe part of the larger galaxy because you have to kind of explain some things away about the politics and the nature of what's going on in the galaxy at this time if you're going to be our first ever film post Rise of Skywalker. And the fact that we did have also another film with Rey's New Jedi Order greenlit far beyond this one before this one was greenlit to come out and be our first post Rise of Skywalker film. The fact that we're replacing that with this means this needs to also do some of that groundwork that Rey's New Jedi Order was going to do with the factions and what's going on at the time. So can't wait to see what they do here. Adding talent's always good, and I think Mia Goth can transform into any role she wants. So very excited to hear that she's now a part of it. Let's turn to your guys' comments here about this story. And again, if you guys comment specifically about the story, you get featured earlier than when we get to the rest of the chat. So let's get into the chat here. We have Pat Fisher says both Mikey and Mia would be fantastic, but I can see Mia disappearing into the role a bit more. Hey, there we said the same thing, Pat. Even though we have no idea what the role is. Yeah, and I think Mikey plays unhinged really well.
Yeah,
You can
yeah.
see that in like Once Upon a Time on Hollywood, especially. But she's good at transforming into that kind of chaotic force. But Mia can really do creepy and really do kind of slower and more psychological type stuff that we've seen her do in the past. So this could be a villain that's really, really different than a lot of the things we have seen in live action Star Wars. So I think it does give them a little bit more depth. Not saying Mikey couldn't do that. I think she could. She obviously just won an Oscar, but we haven't seen her do that type of role before.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, again, I just have a preference for Mikey because I've seen a little bit more of her work in general. And I think obviously once you have an Oscar caliber actor, especially with this being like Liam said, this sort of soft reset that we're going through with the sequels, properly trying to develop it, flesh it out as an era, you kinda wanna have some big names, right? It was nice. Again, I still think it was the right choice overall in the sequels to go with the new, young, fresh actors, right? Like, that's always a good thing. It lets people's impressions of those actors be more about the characters and then just their career as a whole, what they've accomplished so far, what they're adding to Star Wars, right? Like, yeah, I know people would have loved to have seen DiCaprio as Hayden, right? And I think facially, he does match up Jake Lloyd a lot more. But at the end of the day, I also absolutely appreciate that Hayden is someone who's kind of more obsessed with the franchise. The fact that he kind of came back to Ahsoka, and watched all the Clone Wars, met with Matt Lanter and everything, Ashley Eckstein, right? Like he has become a consummate member of the fandom in his own way, and it's hard to look at him in any different sense. And as much as I love DiCaprio when he gets unhinged and kind of blows up, Hayden has, like, more of, like, an anger, like, a burning rage in his eyes that I don't think I've ever seen in any real DiCaprio performance. Like, DiCaprio can almost, like, launch up. Hayden, you just look at his eyes, you just see so much weight there, and, I mean, he was no slouch either, he had films like Shattered Glass and Life as a House, like, he was an upstart actor himself too before he got cast, right? Obviously, how people handled talent in the 2000s is not the same as they handle it in the 2010s. I think overall it was a little bit better, even if the sequels still had a lot of the same issues with, the treatment of actors and everything like the prequels did. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to see the sequel trilogy with any other actors, right? Like, if anything, of the young actors, it was only really Oscar Isaac at that point that you're like, oh, like he's made a name for himself. I was lucky enough to see films from everybody but Daisy Ridley, like in the weeks and the months leading up to the film, and I was like, wow, this is incredible. Hearing that these actors that I really enjoyed and these like almost breakout performances immediately were cast, and I've never really had an issue with casting in Star Wars. It's always just more how is a director, how is a writer gonna execute that, right? I think Star Wars has always had quite solid casting. So, not an issue there. It's just that, like, now with the state of the sequels now that they're finally trying kinda to flesh things out, finally trying to make it an era instead of just, like, a year and a half conflict for a whole trilogy, you kinda have to go with some of the bigger actors like they did in the prequels to, like, flesh out the supporting, right? And it's not the same as the prequels where you still have all these fairly fresh actors as your leads. It's like, "Oh, no, like, we don't have a council, we don't have a New Republic government, we don't have foundations around the big 3 of the sequels." So, while we're working on creating their stories, you kinda have to have some eyes kinda glued to the screen. So, I'm sure Grogu's gonna show up in this time era, right? Like, 100%. Is he gonna be the first move? No, because they're still trying to figure out how his story is concluded in the Mandoverse. So what are you gonna do next? Okay, go for a big name actor like a Gosling, right? A Gosling is someone, especially in his more recent career, has shown a lot more malleability. He's not typecast anymore as like the stoic, like heartbroken person. Right now, he's like, oh, you can see a little bit of the goofier side. You can see a little bit more of like the variety that he brings to his performances. Same thing with Mia Goth. I'm sure that she this is gonna be a great way for her to branch out in a way too from kind of being typecast in almost all the supernatural horror and stuff. So I'm excited, absolutely excited, and it's good to have names that people go like, "Oh, I've heard that name. Oh no, like I've seen that movie." That's gonna only be good. And if they do become pillars, like let's say Mia Goth's not just a one-off, she could be a villain that's reformed or like is recurring. That'd be awesome. That'd be awesome because then you know, like, okay, maybe that worked out really well here in Starfighter for Rey's New Jedi Order. Maybe she has like a scene where she's like in the opening sequence and Rey's fighting her off or something, right? And you feel like, oh wow, everything is a little bit more interconnected. You can see like maybe Jedi Gosling working alongside Jedi Rey. Finn's gone on his own mission with Jana and something, and then Mia Goth shows up there. Like, there's so many different ways you can make it bounce around. So I'm excited. I think that's the smart move at this point. I just have a little bit more of a preference for Mikey because I think an Oscar kinda does take that need to have a big name and make it even bigger.
Anthony says, "I'm glad Star Wars Starfighter is coming out to or coming together after years of canceled projects. Love both Ryan Gosling and Mia Goth. I think they could be great in a Star Wars series." So yeah, I mean that's great to hear as well. Glad you're throwing your support behind the film. I mean, I'm with you, Anthony, because it's just nice to have projects coming out again. Again, like I'm cool with them taking this whole year to regroup and get situated again. But Star Wars is something that one the Lucasfilm basically makes one thing. They make Star Wars. And so you would expect a little bit more coming out of the company that makes one project, right? So I'm glad they're getting their ducks in a row. Glad they're going all in, and I'm glad things are starting to get moving again because this is a project that absolutely sounds promising. I'm all in on this project in terms of like it's actually going to come out because they wouldn't have casting, they wouldn't put, part of their cast on the stage. It's not like when they announced Daisy Ridley's coming back for New Jedi Order because she was already a part of Star Wars, right? So
Yeah.
bringing her back is different than bringing somebody who's like such a superstar like Ryan Gosling on stage in Japan to announce a movie. So this movie's definitely coming out, but it's nice to see them getting everything together and a Star Wars movie nicely progressing that isn't part of the Mandalorian saga.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I mean, it'll be nice to see if like I said again, if there is continuity, if this is a way for having these characters kind of pop up again that we've seen in the sequels that maybe didn't get a chance to really shine, right? It'll be nice to see Poe show up in at the very end of Starfighter because the New Republic or whatever Resistance fleet is still active, still around, right, and covering their territory. It'd be nice to see Jana have a role again because I thought she was a good performance, just shoved in a film that was way too short. So, like, stuff like that will be great. I'd love to see if that kid actually is, like, one of the kids that's gonna be trained in the rumors for New Jedi Order and gets aged up a couple years, like, obviously, with the time that they're taking with New Jedi Order.
Mhm.
It'd be great just so that way, like, yeah, maybe we're running into a sequel trilogy, but without, like, any major time gap. But I would just rather have a lot of great films happen here and then be like, "Oh, yeah, I love The Force Awakens, I love The Last Jedi, I'm mixed on The Rise of Skywalker, but Starfighter was great, New Jedi Order was great." This whole saga, the sequel saga was, like, it finally turned itself around. Like there's some really interesting possibilities. Everything right now with episode 9 is at a standstill because it's like, okay, it's a little repetitive. Okay, if you're gonna do the Palpatine destruction by lightning again, should have at least showed us like all these other Jedi voices, like as their ghosts, as a shimmer or something, right? There were just a lot of things just left on the cutting floor. Finn Stormtrooper rebellion. That could be an entire film of in of itself, right? So, yeah, I mean, we have threads. Like, let's actually progress all the threads besides the Kylo Ren Ben Solo thread, besides the Rey Skywalker thread. Like, let's now that we've done with all the original trilogy cast members, this is a chance for all the other people that were kind of like shut down a little bit more by 8 and 9 to kind of spring back again.
Absolutely, and they need to connect it all. They need to keep building out that universe. They made, and I think honestly, a great way to make us fall back in love with that side of the universe is to go with other characters, is to go with characters and plot lines that aren't tarnished yet, and and build and work your way back to bringing these people back, these characters back, this era back in a way that feels exciting instead of just kind of forced and trepidatious. Like I think we're all a little nervous whether you like the sequels or not. Everybody's a little nervous about what they're going to do with like Rey's New Jedi Order or something like that, or the Berg trilogy, all that type of stuff. Just it leads to possible calamity again. And we need this to be great. And I think if you had these solo films, these spin-off one-off movies that kind of built this era out, added some more characters, added some more depth, then you bring Ray back and she's a piece of this saga for maybe a film and then takes off as the face once again. That's a way to kind of redeem and reclaim some of these characters and some of these moments. It's in stuff like Clone Wars, because we talked about like the Clone Warsification of the sequel trilogy, but it's really difficult to do that with the way they've set up this era. The fact there's only 1 year of time to
Yeah.
mess with between episodes 7 and 8 and 9. There's not much that can really take the versions of the characters that from the sequel trilogy, right? Because if you take them before the sequel trilogy, well, they're not all united. They're not the Rey, Finn, and Poe that you know throughout the trilogy. So to take those versions of the characters and enhance them, you've got a 1 year period between 8 and 9 to explore them, which is really not enough. Where Clone Wars had 3 years with countless battles and all these things going on, the Resistance are very much so in hiding. What can you really do with those characters in that year? So I think one of the ways to really enhance them is say, okay, sequels kind of a sunk cost, but here we go into the breach and we build everything around it because the sequels were definitely lacking in world building. You build characters around it, you build factions that might have come out of the resistance, out of that first order invasion force, First Order remnant. What does that mean with the Sith Eternal, leftovers, who escaped Exegol, all those types of things, those little pieces that were there when the EU started with Return of the Jedi, basically have to do that, take it all and put it into the sequel timeline. And that's how you really flesh out and add more stuff to this. So I think that's the way for them to go. And it's not a bad option to go with a Ryan Gosling, Mia Goth movie to start out with. I'm just hoping, because I think one of the other things that can really redeem this era is to do what the sequels didn't do, and that's take risks and tell new stories and exciting new things. Because we still have our Star Wars, like maybe an Andor that's different in its style, but it's still very much so original trilogy coded. It's in that space, right? It's in classic Star Wars space. So you don't have to do as much with the iconography and exploring new factions and all that stuff. It's a new version of what we've seen before. With the sequels and with the EU back in the day, what made the New Jedi Order so exciting was it was so different and so unique and not anything like Star Wars we had seen before. I think pushing these stories into something that's really different is the optimum way to get the most fans back on board. And so I'm a little trepidatious that a Ryan Gosling, Shawn Levy movie might be a little bit too skeleton crew, might be a little bit too homagey and Star Warsy fun to really push boundaries, which makes it kind of more forgettable in the long run, less exciting in the long run. But right now, Star Wars is also not hitting very well. They need to raise their batting average, and getting things that are 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10s out there and just having consistent track record of making pretty good stuff It worked for Marvel for a very long time. And I think if they do it right, it can work for them to where when they do hit a home run, everybody's opinion of the overall product that Star Wars putting out is higher because everything feels like we haven't had a bad movie or a mediocre movie in a long time. So I think that's part of the process. It just leaves me still without seeing footage and without hearing the true plot behind this. It still leaves me a little like tepid on this film because it just sounds very classic Star Wars. And I definitely want this period to move forward, but it might be kind of a time period or a place to not take a risk right now as we get our footing again in the sequel era. But let's go into our second story, and then we'll turn it over to the comments for the majority of the rest of the stream. So keep sending in those questions, those comments, those theories. And let's talk about our second big story this week that had come out, and that is that the Hollywood Reporter is reporting that Dave Filoni and Carrie Beck are the current candidates to succeed Kathleen Kennedy. So Kathleen Kennedy has been rumored to be retiring for years now. It sounded like in March it was pretty official that it was going to be happening this summer. Then that changed to sometime this year. Then it changed back to end of August. Then it changed back to no, actually, it's sometime this year again. We're not sure, but it does sound like no matter what, she is leaving probably within the next 12 months or so. I could see her going. I said this back when the news broke originally in March that I could see her going up to the Mandalorian and Grogu, and just because they got to make sure that movie's great and she's involved with the production of that film, it makes a little more sense for her to stay until that movie is out. But if you were hiring from within, like a Carrie Beck and Dave Filoni, then you could also transition out and have a nice, smooth transition into the new faces of Lucasfilm while also having people on the projects that are coming out next year that are very familiar with what's going on. So the nice thing about Carrie Beck and Dave Filoni is they've been at Lucasfilm for a very, very long time. Obviously, Dave Filoni has been there for over 20 years, going back to about 2006 when they were originally hiring for Star Wars: The Clone Wars. He show ran that show, was one of the main writers, main executive producers, all that. Led Star Wars Animation for so long, became one of the writers, co-writers, and directors on The Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, Ahsoka, all that stuff. And then in the last year was promoted to CCO of Lucasfilm, Chief Creative Officer, as he's overseeing a lot of the direction they're going to be taking Star Wars in the next few years from a creative side. And I think for all intents and purposes, because correct me if I'm wrong, CCO was created for Lucasfilm. They did not have a CCO before. They basically created the position for Dave Filoni just to have him get him a raise, get him a little bit higher up position in the company. But they didn't have a CCO because George Lucas before was everything. He was president, he was CEO, he was CCO, he was the guy running everything from a creative standpoint as well as a business standpoint. So now having a creative officer, I feel like it kind of just makes sense to remove that position now. And if you're going with the DC route, which is basically what this would be, Carrie Beck would be the person handling all the administration. She would be handling all the logistics and the production, like and then Dave Filoni would be the James Gunn. He'd be the creative person. He'd probably work on a few projects here and there, but be in all intents and purposes, James Gunn, Kevin Feige, that type of person who's overseeing a lot of the story. Now, we talked about like Kevin Feige. Does Star Wars need a Kevin Feige last week? And I don't think Filoni is going to be a Feige in the sense that he's going to oversee and dictate story on all the projects, but he's going to be that guy who maybe is like an elevated Pablo Hidalgo in some ways, like somebody who's actually supposed to keep everything together and say, okay, for this time period, let's keep the tone this way, or let's add this plot point, or maybe go in this direction. And I think that's going to be kind of his role as he oversees the story perspective into everything. I don't necessarily think he's going to be the one coming up with all the story. But yeah, I think on paper, I think this is great. The only negative, and we talked about this back in March, the only negative to me is neither one of these people have experience running a movie studio. And so that was kind of the problem in the first place last time with Kathleen Kennedy was she was one of the great producers of all time incredible producer, worked her way up, assistant to Steven Spielberg, assistant to George Lucas, producer on all their movies, produced so many Steven Spielberg movies, basically every movie he made before 2012. She was the lead producer on from like mid 80s to 2012. She had a great body of work, but she never run a movie studio. And it's completely different than obviously producing a movie. So I think that's the only thing that's slightly scary to me from hiring within is that neither one of these people have ever run a movie studio. I think Filoni has gotten a little bit more because he oversaw Star Wars animation. They just didn't have more than one project really going on at once when he was running Star Wars
Yeah.
animation. So he hasn't had to oversee many, many things. I but I do think this is a good hire if they were gonna hire from within. I think that this makes sense. I threw Carrie Beck out back in March as somebody who I think was really very much so on the forefront of possibly being the next Kathleen Kennedy. But Sonic, when you hear these two names, what are your thoughts? Do you think Filoni should move up to co-president role, or do you think he should kind of stay where he is at CCO?
Yeah, I mean, I think the CCO position was a little bit more like hands-on with every era. I don't think this will necessarily be that. I think for him, he will give the major outlines, but he'll poke his head in as needed, right? I think that's probably for the best. He's as much as I love the guy, he has a tendency, especially recently, to be very George Lucas, and the very simple fact that he just kind of likes overwriting everything. It's just, this is my Star Wars. This is the Star Wars I want, right? I don't want what Hidalgo's version of canon that you interpret as to become like a new tier list system. Like, I can live with a couple discrepancies, right? Especially if they're, like, isolated to Filoni, but I don't want that to start becoming a thing that he influences other directors, other creatives to be like, "No, no, ignore that," right? And yeah, you can say that major retcon did happen in Andor, obviously, with K2SO, Gilroy being like, I wanted to do his origin for him." But if you also read the comic version of it originally, it's like a classified intel document. So you can just spin that and be like, "Oh, this is just the cover story." I and again, at the end of the day, even if Gilroy isn't someone who's obsessed with Star Wars, he obviously has become far more so now after Andor, and he still showed a lot more respect versus, you know, we were complaining basically since, frankly, Rebel season 4, like, "Okay, Ahsoka's back. We've kinda undone a really poetic end for the character. What are you gonna do from here?" It's been a little bit mixed. I still think and I still argue that how he's handled Ahsoka's transition from that stoic, like, repressed version to a little bit more of that Asha X-Teen Clone Wars style version has started coming out a little bit more by the end of the show. It just has a soft landing. But then you see stuff like Bad Batch, right? Like, we didn't really need to at all bring Kanan into the situation. It was completely unnecessary, right? Like, that doesn't match up with the comic at all. It changes a lot of the first 2, 3 issues, which are quite well done. Tales of the Jedi, right? Like, okay, cool. Ahsoka's fighting an Inquisitor. Why is it basically rethreading the whole plotline of the Ahsoka novel, even if it's supposedly canon and all this and that? So that was a problem that I was starting to build up a little bit more and more. Just that Filoni's just willing to kind of be a little haphazard there. Now, when he's at this level, I don't think he'll have that flexibility. I don't think he'll have that time, frankly, to just be like, "Oh, I'm gonna do this specific story, do that." Like, he's gonna be outlining a lot of stuff. He might work on a 1 or 2 big projects like James Gunn is, but James Gunn is not working entirely on Supergirl. He's not working entirely on Wonder Woman. He's not working entirely on Batman: The Brave and the Bold and all this. He's not working he's got maybe story ideas thrown out there, but he's letting other people work it and handle it, right? So I think that's the smartest move in the long run for Filoni. He's starting to fall for a lot of the later stage George Lucas isms, and George Lucas had just a lot strong of a repertoire of influences that he's pulling from. Filoni, not so much. There's only so much about wolves and samurai that I think you can make just work, and to be like, oh, but it's Star Wars. Like, you can't be using this exact word. You can't even be using the same terminology. It's got to be something remixed it, right? So that was my big issue. I think this position puts him in more of what he should have been doing, where he has a little bit of oversight on the different eras, on the general direction of the plot lines going on in these eras. He can step in as needed, but he doesn't necessarily work on every big, like, major project and change things. And then as far as Carrie Beck goes, I mean, she's gonna be the Saffron in the situation, like, for how Gunn has Saffron, right? I think she's had a stellar record, right? I think the only thing that has been, like, a mark against her, I believe, is that she was one of the biggest people behind Acolyte, and that's just because, at this point, she's been around for so long. She's obviously I think, again, she still made a lot of the right choices. The story group idea was great. I think a story room for a writer's room made a lot of sense for Acolyte. I just blame it on, like, everything kind of being a little bit more on set. I blame it on very short episode run times. I blame it on streaming kinda collapsing the last 2, 3 years. I blame it on just Leslie taking ideas that she had in RPGs and obviously from her very dedicated fandom for Star Wars, but not really executing it properly. So, I don't think that's gonna be the issue here. I think Filoni, at the end of the day, even if you don't love his work, I think he makes very solid work, and he makes very spiritual Star Wars. I think that's always gonna be something that people want more of, even if it is a little bit different in each era, like how an original trilogy's view of the Force is very different than the prequels. Yeah, I mean, just I think this can work. It's very much dependent, sadly, on Warner Brothers with Gunn and Safran, right? Like, is that gonna pay off? Is Superman gonna be great? Okay, awesome. Is Supergirl gonna be great? They're starting to film pretty soon here too, so
They're done, I
yeah, I
think,
don't
with
know.
Supergirl.
Yeah, it's gonna be a lot. It's gonna be a lot of waiting and seeing. I think that's the big issue. I know Lanterns is they've got some first look at that too. It's like, okay, and if frankly, they're doing something that feels like a little outdated at this point with how streaming has kind of collapsed, that they're trying to make like a lot of these big Justice League characters have stuff in streaming, have stuff in video games too for some reason. I think that's where like you once you're hearing them kind of reorganizing chapter one and everything, even they're realizing you can't pull that off. That's just not how it works. Streaming is not seamless with movies. Everybody's trying to go back to the movie theaters and keep that stuff more afloat. That's where the money is at the end of the day if you do it right. So, yeah, very curious. I'm hoping Carrie Beck pushes Filoni to, be a little bit more movie centric, right? I'm hoping that he at least gets to do a movie, the ending movie of the Mandoverse, so that way he can be like a little bit more prepared for that. Take what you can from Favreau. Favreau is someone who's been the brains behind the beginnings of like, restarting stuff and all that, right? He's done it with Iron Man, obviously, he's done it with, the live action Lion King, kinda starting off all those live action remakes and stuff. It's gonna be a lot of wait and see, absolutely a lot of wait and see. It's not great when studios have to look at other studios for their gambles to make a very similar gamble, but it could work. I think Carrie's gonna be a more of a grounding force at the end of the day, just like I believe Catherine is gonna be with Gunn, but I think Gunn is a lot more methodical. He has gone through the whole filmmaking production. I mean, the way he talks about post-production, how he has all his shots already established for post super early on, how, like, they don't really shoot like how a lot of more recent MCU films have, like, keep on reshooting until they piece it together. Like, he knows what he's doing there. Look at that stuff. If that's what Filoni needs to start doing as a creative, to look at, like, more mature filmmaking and then see how that applies to his creative instincts, great, but it's a lot of wait and see. It's a lot of wait and see.
Well, yeah, and I think one of the big things to obviously compare between Filoni Beck tandem and a Safran Gun tandem is not just the fact that they're co-presidents, but it's the experience in film. And I think that's the one other thing that's kind of concerning is neither Carrie Beck nor Dave Filoni have ever made a live action movie. And that is a little scary when you look at the fact that Star Wars, like you said, streaming has fallen apart in the last few years. I think streaming it'll find its level. And Disney Plus, I think pretty much every streamer has shown that if you make great content, you will have subscribers.
Yeah.
You just can't dump a bunch of crap on streaming anymore. Basically, that only works for Netflix nowadays because they have such a huge base. And so you have to actually earn your subscribers. Whereas during the pandemic, you didn't really have to because nobody had money to spend on entertainment. They were putting it all in streaming, they were putting it all in video games. And so you got way more than you maybe deserved at the time. Every streamer did. And now you're going to have to earn your subs again. So I think that's a big point. So when you're looking at the future of live action Star Wars film, if that's the new place for Star Wars, if they're going back to the theaters, if that's the thing they want Star Wars to be, is film first and foremost and TV secondary, it is a little bit concerning to hire a tandem who's never made a live action movie, like ever.
Yeah,
Neither one of them have ever made a live action movie, and Carrie Beck has never made a movie before. She's only made TV, and Dave Filoni has made one movie, and it was the Clone Wars movie. He is a producer on The Mandalorian and Grogu, so he does have firsthand experience, obviously, there. We don't obviously know how much hands on role he has compared to Favreau, or whether his producer credit comes from the CCO role, because basically every president, CCO, those types of roles, all of them always get producer credits on basically every movie that their studio makes. So we don't know the exact role of Filoni on that movie. And I'm imagining while he was probably involved, he wasn't as involved because he's been writing and getting Ahsoka season 2 ready to go during the production of The Mandalorian and Grogu. So I don't think he was quite as involved. I mean, again, I don't know, but theorizing, I don't think he was quite as involved as he was on Mandalorian seasons 1, 2, and 3, because they were trying to get Ahsoka out in the same year as The Mandalorian Grogu comes out. So it's kind of a weird one. It's a weird one for sure, because you look at Saffron Gunn and you're like, okay, well, they're movie people, and not just movie people, but Gunn has massive experience making huge, big Marvel blockbusters and succeeding wildly in all three of them. They're all beloved by most audiences, and number 1 and 3 were extremely critically well received as well, and 2 wasn't that far behind. So you have a team that's, well versed in live action film, but not as well versed in TV. So so it's kind of the opposite, right? The weird thing for Star Wars is they've been a TV first series for the last few years, but now they want to get back into film. It'll be interesting to see how this tandem does, if they are actually getting into film. And it'll also be interesting to see if, like, they officially get promoted, and then Kathleen Kennedy, what if she stayed on for a year to help them get their feet wet
yeah,
as this consultant for the film side, because that's her bread and butter. She had never done TV before Star Wars and Lucasfilm, and she was a huge, highly accredited producer. So I think that's the interesting juxtaposition between these two. I mean, Carrie Beck, I think, is a good choice though, because she's done a lot of the best stuff in Star Wars, and they are like Saffron and Gunn. They are like a team. Like
yeah,
she works on basically everything Filoni does, which is also, a pro and a con, because if you're somebody who doesn't like Filoni's style, well, now you not in charge. You have Dave Filoni and his lead producer, one of his lead producers on his stuff that he makes, both in charge running Star Wars. So it's an interesting decision. I think it's one that definitely comes with a lot of Star Wars experience, like Star Wars lore and world experience. They have a grasp on this universe, which is definitely a plus. But it is one that they might have to learn on the job a little bit more. But what are your guys' thoughts? Let us know in the chat. We're going to go through some of the ones that you guys have been sending in about this topic, and then we're going to turn it over to your guys' chats here for pretty much the rest of the stream. Let's see. We have Anthony Tiff, who says, I would not mind seeing Dave Filoni as co head of Lucasfilm, but I'm worried about the fandom menace. We'll see this as a victory, or they will do the same thing to Dave that they have done to Kennedy. So I would be more worried about the last part, although you have seen a lot of people turn on Dave Filoni over the last few years. Um, I don't really understand it. I mean, yes, they haven't been super consistent recently. With Ahsoka was hit and miss. Mandalorian season 3, which was he was a part of, was kind of a miss, but he was actually less a part of Mandalorian season 3 than he was in the first two seasons, and I would say that was their worst season. So he has, I guess, a little bit of positive momentum if you want to look at it that way. Like his two seasons that he was actively involved with writing and being a part of Mandalorian, those were the best seasons. I think he wrote and directed the best episode of Book of Boba Fett, even if it was a show that overall was not very good. So I think he still has a lot of great stuff, but there have been a lot of people who have turned on him over the years. And with the way the conversation online has shifted to just, people trying to pretend like they didn't like something, or trying to act like their voice is louder than other people's. There has been a lot of conversation about people, who didn't like the Clone Wars, didn't like the way it retconned a lot of stuff from the EU, and they've been very vocal for sure. But it is something that obviously the majority of the world likes the Clone Wars. Most people, to them, that is their Clone Wars, and so I think Dave Filoni is still pretty beloved in most fan groups. But I would, obviously that comes with the territory. Anthony is like any person who takes this role, they're going to get a ton of criticism no matter what. They will just also hopefully get praise for the things they do well. I think, unfortunately for Kathleen Kennedy, she has more mix and less resume from Star Wars than she has outright hits. And so when she makes something like an Andor, who, Tony Gilroy has been incredibly on record just hyping her up and saying she's the reason it got made. She was the one that fought for it with Disney. She's the one that did everything. People don't talk about that because they have this narrative already going. And so unfortunately, um, with that's kind of been part of her track record is the amount of people who want to take all the mixed and not well received stuff and bump that up to the top. And frankly, she does have more mixed received things than you would like in her tenure. But if they can come out swinging, even if basically for the next 3, 4, 5 years, almost everything you see from Star Wars will have been started by Kathleen Kennedy, and she'll have been involved, and she'll probably have producer credits on a lot of things that come out. So she'll still have her fingerprints on Star Wars, even if we have a big turnaround in the next couple of years. But it will get credited to Dave Filoni, and so hopefully, if stuff turns around, he can start out on a good foot. He already has enough cachet with the fandom that he can sway that into, being a beloved figure. But it just comes with the territory of running any company or anything that people love, is you're going to get hate if it doesn't go well.
Yeah, I think people are losing a lot of nuance, right? Like when we complain about Filoni, it's more like continuity, right? Like it's just because we're fanatical about that, right? When other people are online, like Twitter and all that, complaining, they're like, "Oh, if Filoni did, and or he would have put like another Glup Shido here, and like Ahsoka would have showed up and all that." And you're right. I won't disagree about the Ahsoka stuff. That is his character from the start. He loves her, and he's gonna use her however he sees fit, right? Again, like we talked about it recently, some of the rumors about Zahn's panel that was, not exactly transcribed, paraphrased by somebody who was there saying like, "Oh, Zahn's no longer like the consultant," like Filoni talked about in 2023 for Thrawn, and the depiction in live action and kind of been like cut out. Like, yeah, stuff like that is concerning. Do not get me wrong. But people are forgetting just how much of a it's still pretty amazing how, he actually did correct a lot of the original flaws of the Clone Wars, right? The way Lucas wanted to handle it was to be like different film reels, like just jumping through different periods of the war, right? That's why season 1 and 2 are very non-linear, right? Once he fixed that, which apparently was a Filoni move, like that really made it a lot easier for people to follow and like be like, "Oh yeah, I wanna watch the story as it gets closer and closer to Revenge of the Sith." Like Liam said, he was good for season 1 and season 2 Mandalorian, and that's for a guy who has a very different opinion about Mandalorian than, like, the cowboy gunslinger look that Favreau wanted, and who told them to combine their ideas? Kennedy, right? Like, "Hey, put your heads together, let's make something great out of it," right? Obviously, I wanna see a little bit more of that lore that we've seen developed in animation actually kinda influence the live action, because it's so rich there, but, yeah, for a guy who had his show canceled with the Clone Wars and then was told to just make Rebels. Right? Like, yeah, I mean, it is really good. I don't think there's a single person who watches Rebels and goes like, "Oh, that's a bad show," right? You might complain about, like, how childish it could be, some of the more unnecessary episodes, but he has a strong grasp on the Force, on the mysteries of the Star Wars galaxy, and he brings a pure spirituality that was missing, frankly, from George Lucas's version of the prequels, right? So he can handle all this stuff. I this idea that he can't do it, I feel like is definitely pushed by people who are, like, only watching Andor, but you can't have an Andor for everything, guys, like, at the end of the day, you don't introduce a five-year-old kid to Andor, like, that would be horrifying. It's so traumatic, it's so serious, like, your opening scene Gilroy's talking about in season 1 is like, "Yeah, I wanted to see how much I could push it with Disney, so we just took them to a strip club." It's like, "What?" Like, "Okay." A brothel in at the beginning of your Star Wars show? Like, That's not common. That's gonna raise questions for kids, right? Kids are still looking for the whimsical fancy. It is, like George Lucas said, a franchise for kids, right? It's just now that our world has become a lot more complicated. It's not as simple per se as the 70s where more of that mythological heroes quest could kind of just carry the story. Things are getting a little harder. Things are complicated. People's attention spans are very different now. There's no single monoculture. There's no way another Star Wars happens for Star Wars. It's just frankly not going to happen because that's not the world we live in. Everything is trying to grab a little bit more and more of our attention. So when I see people kind of like give him crap for his work, well, I mean, is he supposed to be making Andor for TVY7? Like, really? Like, come on, like, make criticisms for Ahsoka, how it ended pretty softly. That's totally fine. But then why are you like criticizing stuff like the run from episode 4 to 6? That was really good. People were so happy to see Ezra, right? People are so happy to see Hayden really be Clone Wars Anakin. That's not just on the actors, that's obviously on him too. So to say he's incapable, I think is really misleading. It's very much agenda driven by people who want Star Wars to only be like Andor. But you can criticize him for sure for things that you feel like you're lacking on, like continuity, feeling like, "Oh, why does he stick to Ahsoka?" That's fine. That's fine. But this is a guy who's been slowly been developed more and more and more. Or he was on every single film for the sequels, and I believe on some of the spin-off, the Star Wars story films, he was also like there as a consultant. He followed very closely with Ryan Johnson and all that. Like he's a guy who's been trying to develop, right? It's impractical for any other studio to be like, "This guy who did our animation from 2008 is now gonna be the head of our, our whole studio," right? But that's how much faith they have in him. He's someone that he clearly has goodwill, right? Maybe they don't talk about him as highly right now because his first real foray to live action is a little bit more mixed for people. But I think people also always forget, anytime you give him a second season, he just raises his game, right? It's him, like, kinda feeling it out. I'm very confident Ahsoka season 2 will be even better than the first season. I'm very confident that whatever he does next, maybe his first film might not be the best, but as long as it's, a 6 or a 7 out of 10, whatever he does next will be pretty good, right? Like, yeah, I'm confident in that guy. I think he can raise the level when it comes to it. This idea that he can't, I don't know, that seems a little silly to me. I think it's just again, it's that Andor purity, and again, Andor is not something that can be replicated. It is still incredible that a season 2 not only was good as season 1, but arguably even better, right? Like, that shouldn't have happened for something that's jumping a year between each 3 episodes, right? That is kind of vague about some details and plot lines, but you feel like, "Oh, man, it's so tremendous with everything there." Give the guy a chance. You gave him a chance for, like, 15 years. Why are we suddenly just discarding him? Criticize what he's kinda picked up, his quirk, sure, but don't say he's incapable.
Oh yeah, he's absolutely capable. I mean, the guy is there's nobody at Lucasfilm who knows more about Star Wars than Dave Filoni. Even if you don't love the way he presents his Star Wars, he still knows more EU, more Star Wars than anybody else there. So all facets, I would assume Dave Filoni is the leader in Star Wars knowledge. So like I think right off the bat, having him as a co-president just really adds a lot to getting more projects that feel like they're in the vein of Star Wars and less like adaptations of Star Wars
Yeah.
into other genres, right? Like Star Wars is a genre in and of itself. It should be at the forefront of any other genre adaptations you're adding into it, right? So I think that's a big thing for Dave Filoni, but he's absolutely capable. You just look at his progression from Mandalorian season one, his first two episodes there to his episode in season two to his episode in Book of Boba Fett. The guy got better and better and better every single time. And then with Ahsoka, he has very high highs and they have some mixed to low lows. But I do think when he's given the chance, and he, especially if he's given somebody also with him who can also similarly to the way people talk about prequel George Lucas, like if you could pull him down a little bit and just say, "Hey, Dave, like maybe we should look at it from this angle." I think that could definitely benefit him because the Ahsoka show is so obsessed with Japanese iconography and samurai
Yeah.
imagery and all that type of stuff, and it goes beyond just an homage like Mandalorian season 2 episode 5 was. And in that way, it also kind of changes and modifies the things that people love about Ahsoka, right? Because you're taking so many other things. So like he's a guy that maybe gets a little bit too obsessed with some of the things he's working on and writing, but he also has hit so many home runs for this franchise. So you absolutely can do it. I have full faith in him. I just think the one thing that makes me nervous about the combo is just the fact that neither one have live action film experience. And they can get it, but I don't know if they should be getting it on the job when they're running an entire film studio that's bread and butter is live action film. So we'll see how that works out. But going back to the comments here, we have Fabricio Palacios who says, "So happy for Filoni. He deserves it. Star Wars is saved." And then says, later down, "Yes, please, Dave Filoni all the way." So we do have some people who are pretty excited about the Filoni possibility. I think just last thing I'll say about this too is I think no matter what, at some point Dave Filoni will end up as a president or co-president of the company. He will. He's just been his trajectory his entire career since Lucas hired him. So I don't think it's a problem to do it now. I just wonder who you pair him with. Because if you do pair him with a Carrie Beck and they've mostly all worked on the same thing, then there's less differing opinions there.
Yeah.
Unless because they know each other, they feel more comfortable telling each other that they like or don't like a direction certain things are going. Whereas if you hire two opposing personalities or two people who never worked with each other, there might be more friction there. So there are pros and cons to both of it, but do they have somebody who's strong enough? And I don't know anything about Carrie Beck other than what she's worked on, right? I never met her. I don't know her philosophy, her style. So this is all just speculation, but do they have somebody in Carrie Beck who's strong enough of a personality to talk down Dave Filoni or tell him, "Hey, we got to go this direction," or "I think we should do this," or is she just going to end up being the business person and let him run all the story? Because I think if you hire co-presidents, hopefully they both have input on what projects they should work on. So that's our thoughts on that. But we're going to turn over the rest of the stream to you guys. It's basically going to be dedicated to your questions, your comments, anything you'd like to discuss in the chat. We have a lot of chats to go through. So if you have not sent in a chat and you would like to support the channel, you can send in a super chat. It does bump you up to the top. We will answer it first. Otherwise, it is first come, first serve. And that means we're starting at the top with Anthony Tiff, who says, "Hi, lads. Good to be back. Sorry I was away for a while. Busy with college classes. I'm done, though. Absolutely was astonished on how good Andor season 2 was, and I think it was better than season 1. I'm with you there, Anthony. It was amazing. Glad you're joining us again and that you're back, and welcome back to the channel."
Yeah, definitely. Hope you had a good end to your college year.
Anthony also says, "I believe that there is a possibility that the fandom menace hopefully is going away because from what I've seen, a lot of people from that side have been quiet because that could be because Andor was so good, but I think that many people have gotten tired of people constantly being negative about things and making dozens of videos a month on stuff that they don't like, and think that it's because people have realized they are simply grifters, unlike you and others are reasonably humble and open to dialogue." Yeah, I mean, again, you're kind of our reporter on the fandom menace, Anthony. I try to stay away from that side of Star Wars as much as I can, but I have noticed there has been, just from our channel, just from the comments we get from our viewership numbers, from the people, the new people who are joining us on these lives, and the new people who are commenting, and just there just does seem to be a little bit of a small renaissance for Star Wars here since Star Wars Celebration to now, and it is fading a little bit as we get further and further from Andor, but it just does seem like people generally, between all the new news to Revenge of the Sith re-release to Andor season 2, it seems like generally excitement is winning right now over criticism and anger. And even when people do criticize Andor season 2, it seems like those who are coming at it from a bad place are not really getting people who agree with them as much, because it is just so undeniably good that it's
Yeah.
really hard to go all in on it. But I think the combination of kind of stuff for everybody, between new announcements, Revenge of the Sith and how beloved that is, which to me really kickstarted this whole thing. Just Revenge of the Sith love leading into Andor. Because I don't think it's a coincidence that Andor had such a massive spike between its first weekend and then the weekend that Revenge of the Sith came out. Right? It really had a big spike its second week, and so I think that's a kind of a testament to like Star Wars being back in the minds of people and be like, oh yeah, Andor, I forgot about that show. It's on again. I guess I'll check it out. I think the combo of that and then how great reviews, it has been a really nice little 2 month and a half period for Star Wars fans. So glad you're enjoying the time around the fandom as well right now, Anthony.
Yeah, I don't think the Phantom Menace will unfortunately go anywhere. They're just waiting for the next thing, right? Because negativity sells online. All these algorithms, everything are catered to make money off of people, being pitted against each other, all the friction and everything. So it sucks. It absolutely does suck. But I think, you have to embrace the moments that we do have right now. Like Liam's saying, like it is nicer right now. I think that is pretty undeniable. I think people are just having a good time. I see so many Calkite memes, right? Even Ben Mendelsohn's on stage talking about Calkite memes, right? Like, yeah, at the end of the day, that show was a phenomenon. Like, it should not have worked, and it did. So that's something that we've been missing from Star Wars, frankly, since I would argue since 1980. You can love Revenge of the Sith, right? But I think Revenge of the Sith also just has some nostalgia that definitely helps smooth over things. Obviously, the influence of Clone Wars and all that. But this is, like, the most undeniable thing that Star Wars has made. Even people who loved Mando Season 1 can point out, like, "Man, the middle stretch is not that great," right? It's just kind of one-off episodes. The end of Mando Season 2, sure, right? But even there's plenty of people who are like, "I don't like Mando Season 2 because it gets away from, being like a, like a lone wolf in a cub situation." And you're like, "Okay, I can see that, sure." I think this is the closest we've gotten ever in the fandom to like, the reception after something has released that's like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, no, this is incredible. This is something that's awesome," right? And then obviously the nostalgia of Revenge of Sith being back, Celebration and everything. People like Tales of the Underworld too, right? Visions will be later. It's not gonna be like the big May 4th thing, right? So, a little bit more substance for a May 4th release. I think all that's really added up. Absolutely has. The High Republic is on a good run here, from what I'm hearing. We haven't really finished the final book in the saga, but people are saying great things who've already had their reviews out there. So it's nice. Even the comics, people are generally pretty positive on like everything that they've been seeing from the High Republic or from the early New Republic days for the original trilogy characters, all this and that, right? So yeah, you're right in that sense that, like, yeah, I think people are just happier right now, but the Phantom Menace will find something, right? I'm hoping we don't have, like, another Acolyte where it's just so polarized that it just becomes, like, political before we have anything about the show, right? Like, to this day, it really does hurt me when I see Amanda Stenberg, pictures of her coming to Celebration dressed up as Padme. You don't do that unless you have a genuine love for the franchise, right? It's not up to her how everything got executed. She's doing what she was told to do, right? So it sucks. It does suck, right? And I think both of us were super excited for Acolyte because it was gonna be so different. High Republic. It seemed like everything was lining up right, and it just didn't. It just simply didn't, right? So, yeah, Phantom Menace will always pop up again. They're looking for something like that. I know there's certain Star Wars creators that are, chomping at the bit, that, that they said, "Oh, I won't review Andor season 2," but then by the end, they're like, "Oh, I will, and I still have problems." Like, someone said that it was worse than Attack of the Clones for them, and I'm like, "Okay, like, let's take a step back and, like, really think about what you just said there. Worse than Attack of the Clones, arguably the weakest in the whole prequel trilogy, like, yeah, like, come on, guys, like, I think that stuff when it's almost so outrageous that you can't be like, "Oh, yeah, that's a great argument." No, it's not an argument anymore, it's an opinion, and it's opinion that's not really well favored. So, yeah, hopefully we are moving past that. Hopefully, you are right that everybody's looking for a little bit more maturity when they're talking about Star Wars again, or at least just positive dialogue that can still feed in criticism, can still have different viewpoints, come together. But yeah, yeah, just be ready. It's gonna happen. I wouldn't be surprised if like the Andor fans will see Mandalorian Grogu and be like, "Oh, this is horrible. Why do I need to see this random Jedi or that random thing that's gonna be connected to the sequels and all that?" Someone will always find a way, right? But the only thing that can stop that from happening as if Lucasfilm really makes a strong push and just makes great products, undeniable products. You don't have to make an Andor season 2 again. But if you are consistently hitting Mando season 1, season 2 levels, it's gonna be really hard for kids to, like, hate that stuff.
Yeah.
It's just a fact, right? And I mean, even after the mixed reception of The Last Jedi, I don't think people lost all their faith. It was more like everybody got frustrated at The Rise of Skywalker. It's like, you're not appeasing either group, right? You're trying to appease everybody, and it's not
Yeah.
working out that way, right? So have a commitment to whatever you're doing. Make sure you're taking your time. It seems like the MCU's really been trying to do that, you know? Deadpool, Wolverine was great. They salvaged Brave New World into something passable. Thunderbolts was really solid. There's a lot of hype now riding into Fantastic Four and Doomsday and everything. Like we're seeing that happen with someone with Feige, right? Back in charge with television actually being settled into what the MCU formula is with Daredevil, with the fixes that were made there. I think it definitely can happen here with Star Wars, and I think we are hopefully on the right track. It's just we don't have projects in the big screen to tell us that yet. Once the general audience sees a Mandalorian and Grogu and hopefully loves it, it makes everything a lot quieter. TV is a little bit more battleground, it simply is. But once you get a movie that's big, that gets people's attention, they're like, "Oh, I don't know how this connects, but now I'm interested. I wanna see that. Oh, you're telling me there's something on this show that's actually important. Bam, bam, bam." That will automatically elevate just the excesses of streaming and will help you forget a lot of the flaws, and then hopefully everything gets settled out here, you know? Where I
Mhm.
argue we're in this sort of bantam era for Disney and its first real decade of Star Wars. Hopefully, we're moving towards the Del Rey era, especially the new Jedi Order, right? Where it's like there's structure, there's planning, there's great execution, and there's adjustments made because people are like, "Oh, that's great, but it's a little too dour. Like, maybe let's get a little bit more of the Star Wars that we actually love into that formula again," and then they do it, and everyone starts loving that stuff again, right? So, I think we're never gonna lose Star Wars. It's just a matter of, like, dealing with the reality of streaming being such a big false boom, the fact that so much of our studios are now kinda run by investment and asset management firms, the same as our algorithms and everything. We're not gonna win every single time, right? But the simplest way to win is just a great product that everybody can at least take a good positive out of.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's been the number one way to win for a while now, and you see the successes from the last 20 years in the box office or on streaming. It's always the things that are great or really good, and you have to build that trust and that track record, right? Like, I mean, it went out the window for the MCU as fast as it came
Yeah,
because if you look at 2016-ish, 2015-ish to 2020, everything they made a ton of money because they had the majority of things they made at that time were really good to great or tied into something even if it wasn't as good. Like Captain Marvel is a mediocre movie at best, but it tied into the end credit scene of Infinity War and it made $1 billion, right? Like you just have to create that trust there and people will buy in. So if Star Wars can build a string of great TV seasons, good to great TV seasons, if it can build a string of good to great films, it doesn't always have to be 10 out of 10s. It just needs to be something that people go, especially in the movie theaters, they go and they spend their money and they feel like, "Huh, that was worth seeing. I got
yeah,
something out of that." That's really all you need to do because that's what Marvel did forever if you wanna be successful. Now, Marvel let that success get to them. They went into phase 4 and 5 without really a concrete plan. It went all over the place, then they lost their plan, it all fell apart, but they had a stretch where they were locked in, everything was connected, everything felt rewarding even if you didn't like the movie that much. And that's where Star Wars needs to get is just make their audience feel like they're rewarded for watching something, make them feel like their trust, their faith, their money was worth it. And I think that's the big thing for them to do. I think part of that also with TV moving into TV in the future is like, and a lot of people have expressed this on our channel as well, we gotta stop the waiting 2 to 3 years for seasons of TV. Like, we
yeah,
need every year to every other year seasons for these shows. If you're gonna have a recurring show, it needs to be every year, every other year. I know I've said on the past that and again, it's not my money, so I can say whatever I want, and, they might disagree with me at Disney, but I don't see the purpose in green lighting a Star Wars show and not greenlighting a season 2 as well with it, and then
Right.
at least being actively in pre-production when the show comes out, because if it is a bomb, like, let's say The Acolyte, and you still decide to cancel it, you can cancel it, and yeah, you paid all these people to work on it, and it might never come out, but you can cancel it before production actually starts. But if you have them ready to go into production basically a month after the last episode of this new season comes out, you'd get the show out within a year to year and a half, and you would have that next season. So I don't understand the process behind all these greenlighting all these shows one season at a time and then saying waiting 6 months after the show ends for all the numbers to come in and then being like, "Yeah, let's do a season 2," like we're seeing on Ahsoka, right? Because Ahsoka seems to be getting a worse rap now than it got when it came out. When it came out, more people liked it than they do now. But if you had a season 2 that came out within a year or a year and a half, I think that same swell of support plus maybe more people, if it was great, it would have gone up, you know. But now people have sat with Ahsoka and it's become this kind of tarnished product that, you know, the loud voices out there telling everybody it sucks have won over the people who did like it, because what's the point in really, you know, really talking about Ahsoka right now? It's been 2 years, 3
Right.
years
Right.
since it came out. There's not gonna be people constantly defending something for 3 years, so you lose your supporters a little bit. They'll come back when season 2 comes out, but, like, it's kind of that flow of Star Wars shows that they need to get that down as well, because we need these shows out rather than waiting years for them. If you're gonna commit, commit. I think that's a big thing, and hopefully the next wave of Star Wars content starting next year really commits to and goes through with their projects. Anthony says, I have been watching a lot of lore videos from Stupendous Wave and other channels. Stupendous Wave has really good lore videos about Darth Malgus, and it seems that he's essentially the Old Republic Vader. He was heavily injured, killed his own wife, sacked the Jedi Temple. He even uses a variant gem. So, like Anakin did, and Vader's armor somewhat looks like Malgus. Do you think Sidious intended for Vader's suit to look like Malgus' appearance, as Sidious in the EU loved Malgus? I don't think he intended it to look like Malgus, because that Malgus came 40 years after Sidious and Vader were created. But yes, they could kind of retcon that. Also says, what do you guys think of Malgus? I personally find him to be a great addition to the Old Republic era and just overall cool character. I agree with that completely. I really like Malgus, one of my favorites, if not probably my favorite character that came out of the MMORPG version of the Old Republic. I do think he's a really awesome character, and definitely if you're interested, Anthony, and you want like a full story, I know it's basically built for you in all these videos, but if you want the whole story about how he kills his wife and all that type of stuff, read Deceived. It's a really, really good book. Paul S. Kemp. He didn't write too many Star Wars books, but he had a pretty good run there at the end of the EU and into canon. Wrote Lords of the Sith also, if you've read that book. So definitely check that one out if you're interested in Malgus, because it's really our only non-game story about Malgus. So there's the trailers, which actually you got. Yeah, I know the sacking of the Jedi Temple, that's in the trailer as well. That is amazing. It's one of the best cinematic trailers ever. You watch that and then you read the book, so it actually goes hand in hand if you just like the trailer. But anyway, yeah, I love Malgus. I think he was absolutely created to kind of have a little bit of that Vaderness to him. He's a little bit different, obviously, with he's more of a conqueror, and then he kind of all falls on its face. But the way he kills his master in that trailer as well, like he's a combination of a few different types of Sith, but definitely iconography is supposed to be a little bit more reminiscent of Vader. But he's actually a little bit closer to what they do with Plagueis, because Plagueis in the book, if you've read the Darth Plagueis book, he gets has an assassination attempt on him, and he gets his throat basically kind of cut and damaged, and he has to wear this respirator that looks very much so like Malgus's. So it's similar in that regard, which you can also say that maybe Palpatine got the idea via his master Plagueis, who had that respirator when Palpatine killed him. So there are a lot of Sith over time that have had those same uh, those same life support systems that Vader had, but definitely a very cool character and one of my favorites in the MMO Old Republic.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can see what you're saying here about, like, Sidious having designed the Vader suit because of, everything that Malgus achieved. Again, at the end of the day, his story is not concluded, right? So maybe inspired loosely in the EU from what was written at that point, sure. But I think one thing that the EU also made a big emphasis on, and canon has talked about it a little bit more, but Vader's a little bit more independent in a lot of ways with his thinking, and how he repairs his own armor. But the original armor in the EU for Vader, it's not meant to really support him. Like it is supposed to give him basic functions, but a lot of books kind of say it's like an outdated technology. It's like stuff that's
Mhm.
causing him more pain. It's trying to feed more into his anger and all that, right? I mean, even the surgery, he didn't get any anesthesia for that at all, right? Like this is a guy who's, like, he's screaming on the board and everything, so, yeah, I can see that. I think Malgus, we don't really know as much about his life support and everything, like, is it supposed to be, like, feeding him more anger and all that? I think it is to a degree, but there are things, like, in his relationship with his Twi'lek wife and everything that I think are a little bit more Vader coded than necessarily the life support system. I think Malgus is just an example of a character, especially because this is my opinion, but I do think a lot of the Old Republic is a little over-designed. It's a little too almost futuristic in a lot of ways, which can make sense if they actually spent a little bit more concrete time on the new Sith Wars and, like, the Dark Age that comes about all these years and centuries of destruction, between Jedi and Sith. But, yeah, I mean, you look at that outfit, it's like, yeah, it's more like a battle armor enhancement, and then Satele kinda screws him over, and then at that point, it's like, "Alright, it's built up too much, he's a lot older now, it's been 20 something years, bam, okay." It's all there, right? I think Vader is more of, like, a case of, like, yeah, Palpatine is like, "I'm so disappointed in you that I'm here to make your life miserable and you just a dog of the Empire," right? So I think that's where it's a little different. I don't think Malgus necessarily goes through that same treatment. I think it's a lot more self-chosen. So I think that was where I would split it. But yeah, I would say about like the lightsaber form and everything. You're right. Yeah, he very much fights like an Anakin, a lot more acrobatic like a Clone Wars Anakin does, but more of a bruiser too. So it's like it's a nice little combination of what we see with the Vader fighting style and then the Anakin fighting style. So yeah, I mean, it is pretty cool. I don't know if Sidious ever intended for that to be modeled specifically on Malgus, like Liam said, probably closer to Plagueis, if anything, because, all this stuff over the centuries is not one to one, doesn't matter how good the holocron is, right? It's not you're not there. These are stories, these are perspectives, these are things that are kind of secondhand accounts. They're never always properly primary, even holocrons. They're kind of almost like semi-alive too, and that version of the character is not necessarily the character too, right? So, yeah, I could see that, I could see that, but if there's anything that he was influenced by in canon, I guess maybe the canon Darth Bane look, if he does still have all the little basilisks underneath him on as his armor that are causing him pain, maybe you could have gone for that in the EU as well as an inspiration. It's a lot closer because it is Bane Knight Sith that, that he is part of. Don't really have Bay Knight Sith in the Old Republic, you have armies of Sith, right? It's a Sith empire, so that's where I would kind of push a little against it, but, I can see some where some of the inspirations could have definitely, maybe had some at least visual, relativity to what Vader's final look is.
Nightshade 1765. Hope you're still here watching. If you're not, well, that's too bad. It says you a phase one or phase two fan. I assume you're talking about clones. I'm a phase one fan. I love the little like head tail. I think it just the combination of like Mandalorian style with stormtrooper armor. I love phase one. I think it looks awesome. Phase two is pretty great. I love the evolution in from phase two into stormtrooper helmets, but I gotta go phase one. It still has. It's just to me got that more of that like it factor. It's more of what I think of when I think of clones specifically because they start to morph into the stormtrooper armor with phase two, and that loses a little bit of its distinctness. And I also just love the way clones look more so in Attack of the Clones when you have phase two clones, like if we're talking about live action appearances. I love the way they look in phase one in Attack of the Clones a little bit more than the like more full CGI versions that you get in Revenge of the Sith. where basically that George doesn't really have like anybody in costume outside of the occasional Tamara Morrison as Cody. Uh, in in Attack of the Clones, they just look a little bit stockier, a little bit more built. They're just a little less disposable. I feel like it looks a little bit more clean. I don't know, something about Attack of the Clones, but yes, Phase One for me.
I am a Phase 2 guy. I agree with all your points about Phase 1. I think it's very iconic. It definitely hits that 40s retro sci-fi so well with the little tail at the back. It just even as a kid, I was always like, "How do they put their helmet on?" Because that neck does not work. Your head cannot go through that, right? Like, and anytime cosplayers are trying to be accurate about it, they're like, "We make it like a separate piece connected with magnets or something if we want it like that," right? And yeah, I think it's because he went fully CGI, it's a little hard to appreciate it. So when you see how it played out in Ahsoka flashbacks, right, they're kind of blending a little bit more of the Clone Wars look into it, and you're like, "Ah, is that really it?" And you see, like, next to some CGI ones when they're running, it's not 100% perfect, right? Especially the chest plate, I think, is a little bit off too, like, it's way too narrow, form-fitting. Um Definitely problems too with Phase 2, obviously being all CGI like Liam said, but I do like how it becomes a little bit more about their personality, about their battalions, about who they're aligned with, who's their Jedi commander, right? I like the original style of like, okay, this is captain, this means commander and all that. That's all cool to me, but I do like the personality. I think it reflects more heavily on, like, how clone troopers are still human, right? That they do change, they do customize, and obviously, once you see Clone Wars, you see something like Commander Cody and everybody in his company, and his battalion. Yeah, they're very much coded like, Obi-Wan Kenobi is. Very clean cut, very posh about how they look. They all have the classic buzz cut, even if they have, like, slightly different variations of the uniforms. Then you see the 501st, and Anakin is just one of the boys, you know, like, he's like he probably was like, "Yo, that's such a cool tattoo. Get it over your head right now." Like, hard case, like, you know, there's so much personality there that it's I just absolutely love it. I absolutely do love just the personality that comes through, and you get to see, like, cool designs like Wolf and his helmet, like, special helmets and all that. I do love Gree, when he's on Kashyyyk. I do love that camouflage look. That's something I wish more people cosplayed, and it looks so good in season 6 of the Clone Wars too, so, like, I do love I love both, but I think I wanna go Phase 2 a little bit more. But truthfully, I probably like a little bit more of the ARC troopers, like the Fives helmet and the Echo helmet, because it has a little bit of the fin in the back. It kinda combines the visor a little bit. It's not quite Phase 2, it's not quite Phase 1. It's getting there, and for some reason, they just had a lot more aura. They look so much cooler to me. There's some things on their chest gear, on their belt and everything that just feels like a nice little blend. It you know, and it makes sense because 'cause they're specialized, they're specific soldiers, they're the ones who made it to the ARC level, right? But then I can't forget about characters like Fordo, right? And everybody
Yes.
on Monolith and all that. I'm like, "Oh, man, they look so badass, they look so cool." But I
And
like
that's
them a lot more than the Attack of the Clones versions, right? It's so much based on the medium, honestly.
Well, and that's what I was gonna definitely counter with is like for me, growing up, my foundation in the clones was Republic Comics, so Alpha,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Genndy Tartakovsky Clone Wars with Fordo and the ARC troopers and how badass they were in that, and then their fight with Grievous, even they have Phase One armor, right? So it's just there's so much to that look to me that feels more clone than even though Revenge of the Sith is my favorite Star Wars movie, even than that, because the clones I feel like have even though you get to see a helmetless clone in Revenge of the Sith with Cody, and like that's the first time you really get to know one of the clones, they have a little bit more agency and personality kind of in Attack the Clones because you get a little bit more of them actually doing things rather than just kind of standing around talking. I don't know, it's hard to explain, but the one thing I definitely would give you is like all the different cores of stormtroopers, all the different companies, I mean of clone troopers, all the different companies, all the different legions. I do prefer phase 2 with the paint and like when you have 501st Legion clone troopers, I prefer phase 2 armor. When you have 212, I prefer phase 2. Like phase 2 looks better, I think, for all the painting and all the different design. But when it's just we're talking about the white clone trooper phase one versus the white clone trooper phase two, I definitely take white clone trooper phase one like every time for me. But I also one of the other things I love about phase one too is seeing a lot of the Jedi in the phase one armor because you don't really ever see them in phase two armor because the way they shift it in Clone Wars and even in Clone Wars '03, they you don't really ever see them in phase two armor. So you have in phase one armor, you've got the Obi-Wan jousting, which is my favorite design. It's the design I have
Yeah.
for the channel for my character art, and I just love that design so much. And his helmet there, and then you even get him in a helmet in Attack of the, I mean, in the Clone Wars as well. So there's a lot of great design as well with the combination of Jedi armor. So yeah, they're both great, but I definitely lean to phase one. But let us know what your favorites are. Everybody who's watching, Nightshade, if you're still around, let us know your favorite in the comments. Brandon says, "Don't know if you guys have seen Summer Game Fest, but what do you guys think about the Deadpool VR game? Excuse me, Deadpool VR game for MetaQuest 3 having a new voice actor, Neil Patrick Harris, play him instead of Nolan North? I love Nolan North. That Deadpool game is kind of underrated as well, so it's nice to kind of see it come back in a way, even though Nolan North is not voicing him. I think it looks cool. I've been hit and miss with VR. Some things work for me. I don't have a MetaQuest 3. I got a MetaQuest 2 when it kind of went on sale and started phasing out just to have it. And I played it a lot when I first got it, but haven't played it much lately. I had PlayStation VR for the PS4, but never got PlayStation VR 2 for PS5. So somebody who enjoys at home VR. We've talked about a lot on the channel, the Void and stuff like that's great VR. That's hard to top. But as for at home VR, I'm not a big VR gamer. It's just something it's hard to convince myself to do just because it's like, I don't know, it always gives me headaches and it just is not something that I'm that into. But it does look very cool. And I think playing as Deadpool is awesome. And if they really come out with a VR game that I hear is like absolute must play, I would love to check it out. But outside of Half-Life Alyx, I've really never heard anybody say, "Oh, this VR game is an absolute must play." So it kind of limits me to whatever I find interesting. Deadpool will be around there. I never played the Iron Man one though, so Marvel's kind of right on that bubble of something I would check out in VR. But I have played all the Star Wars ones. But outside of Star Wars, there's not too many things that I instantly go to my VR headset to go buy. So maybe this, if I hear this is great, maybe it'll be a system seller to me for MetaQuest 3.
Yeah, I heard about the voice actor change. I mean, Nolan North is a legend in the industry, so going with someone who's arguably way bigger because he's been on TV, he's been in movies, can work. I think Neil Patrick Harris definitely has a dynamism in his voice to kinda have a great take on Deadpool, but yeah, I don't know, it's a VR game. It doesn't even seem like you'll get a lot of tension like you would like a proper console game, and I mean, everything's getting more expensive. I wouldn't be surprised if they start making VR games even more expensive too than they already are, so what games are now, what, 79.99 here in the States? So it's like, yeah. Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
okay, well, if are we gonna be forced to now, like, pay for a Neil Patrick Harris performance out of this, right? Like, okay, sure, fine. But yeah, I know, it's nice. It's nice to see that VR is still being worked on. But it's kind of like how AI is right now, like, it burst its bubble quite a while ago, right? It's they're still gonna work on it, they're still gonna get there, but, just like how AI people are publishing white papers saying like, "Yeah, large language models is not the end all be all for, like, pure consciousness for an artificial intelligence." Neither is the current setup for VR, like, this is not like the VR people, like, dream about when they see, like, Sword Art Online and that becomes, like, a huge anime phenomenon, right? This is not the VR like we were talking about the Void where you can interact physically and, you can feel vibrations and heat from the building around you, right? It's not fully immersive yet. It may never be with the handles, with the glasses and lens. I know the 3 is a lot better than the 2 and the, 3S in that sense because it's way more, apparently much nicer for people with glasses or who don't have, like, the best sight, a lot more adjustable. But still, that's a lot of weight on your head and all that, right? I mean, we might have to just accept the fact that if you're gonna play, VR in the future, maybe in 10, 15 years, it's because you have something like Sword Art Online where you wear it sit down in bed, and then you feel like you're in the world. We're not there yet. We haven't tricked our brain yet. We're tricking it physically, but we're not mentally all there yet. So once that happens, awesome. But we're not pumping in as much money as we did when like Oculus was the only brand and HTC Vive was like the two big contenders. Now it's like it's a cool thing to have, but it's almost like more for like mobile gaming. It's almost more for like people who are just there to like be there as like the early adopters. But I'm always excited to I wanna still play Vader Immortal and instead of just watching it. I wanna be able to play Tales from the Galaxy's Edge and all that, just so I can have that completionist in me, but I don't know, I think VR is still somehow still stuck in its infancy.
Yeah, I loved Vader Immortal. It's definitely less polished than Tales from Galaxy's Edge, but it has a better story. It's a little more interesting, and you get to use a lightsaber, so that's awesome. Uh, but yeah, I mean, as for VR, I don't think it can truly take off until, like you were saying, like you have to have all of the truly transformative things about VR that VR can make you feel without reminding you that you're sitting on your couch or
Yeah,
standing in a room, and that's pretty much impossible without somebody having like a dedicated VR room, like one day, yeah, maybe they'll build a room addition to your house where you have a treadmill you stand on so you can move around and it moves with the game and you wear a pack or something that like gives you feedback and you have like a room that shoots wind and all this stuff at you like that would it would be where it truly takes to have a full VR experience. I know we're just talking about hypotheticals and kind of ranting now, but like I think for me it's still kind of in its gimmick phase, and I'll check out Deadpool if I ever get a MetaQuest 3. But with the price of the MetaQuest when it launched, the MetaQuest 3 when it launched, it was super expensive. It kinda took me out of, like, should I get this or not? Because I'm fine spending $200 on something that's even if I'd never really play it, I play it for an occasional game or 2, like, I'm cool with that. But if it's something that's like $400 or whatever it was when it launched, then you really have to think about, "Okay, is it worth it?" Because I might just play about 3 games on this thing and then never play it again. So, it's kind of on that bubble for me. But hopefully if Deadpool's awesome, it makes me wanna check it out. And then as for Neil Patrick Harris, I forgot to comment on that earlier. I love Nolan North, but he doesn't sound his version of Deadpool does not sound like Ryan Reynolds, and so I think that's why they got Neil Patrick Harris because in the trailer he sounds so much more like Ryan Reynolds. He's basically doing the Ryan Reynolds impression, and so I think I would imagine Marvel is more like, hey, let's try to sell Ryan Reynolds Deadpool, and if we can't get Ryan Reynolds to show up for the VR game, then let's get somebody who can do a Ryan Reynolds-esque voice. And Neil Patrick Harris, for as famous as he is, he's actually done quite a bit of voice acting over the years. Like he played Nightwing and some of the DC animated movies and stuff. Like he's done some legit voice acting in the past. So I think it's a pretty good choice. But it is, always weird to think of replacing Nolan North because of how how iconic he is. Fabricio Palacios says, I strongly believe the best way to save the sequels is exploring the politics as with Andor and taking Claudia Gray's book Bloodline as a reference. They have to build lore, not invent new things out of nowhere. I agree with bits and pieces of that. I agree with you that the best way to save the sequels is to actually build the world. So that means having to go into the politics. It means having to say, this is what happened to the First Order after it fell on Exegol. These are the remains of the First Order. This is the remain of the Sith Eternal. What are we doing about these factions that still exist? Are we taking the New Republic and canon approach of being like, the Empire's basically gone. Let's just not only deal with it when it becomes a kind of New Republic Legends approach of like, no, we're going to hunt down basically every Imperial, and every time they come in, we're going to try to take them out. And then a Thrawn or somebody appears, and they didn't realize how much power was there. Like, which approach are they going to take? I think that's a big thing. Establishing the politics, right? The entire New Republic capital was blown up along with the Senate and the senators, and we don't know who lived and who died because we don't really know any senators or anybody from that time. We don't really know the structure of what the New Republic was like at that time. We don't really know what came of Bloodline, right? Bloodline takes place 4 years before The Force Awakens, or 6 years before The Force Awakens. So it still had a lot of you still had a lot of time between the promotion of like the first senator position and all the things they were coming up with in Bloodline to the Force Awakens. We don't know what got enacted and what didn't. So there's still so much to clarify, not just about what's happening after the sequels, but during the sequels. So that's a big one. So I'm with you, Fabricio, on that. I definitely think that's a big thing to go with. As for they have to build lore and not invent things out of nowhere, isn't inventing things out of nowhere kind of what building lore is, right? Like you have to come up with new ideas. There's nothing they could and should pull things from the books and things that have set up around that period. And again, we don't have too much, but things like Bloodline is fairly close and it's like our only look at New Republic politics right before the sequel trilogy. So they could look at that. They could look at Resistance Reborn, which was one of our few books that takes place in the sequel era, the Phasma and Galaxy's Edge books. They can look at all that stuff, but this is a such an amorphous period of time. We don't really know about anything at this time. So unless you're saying pull from legends as well, they've got to come up and invent things out of nowhere because that's really the only thing they could do for this time period. But I think what you're trying to say, Fabrizio, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but what I'm understanding from what you're kind of trying to say is don't ignore what we have before and just say like, oh, there's this new faction that's here now, and now we also have the Jedi, and they're just going to have this battle and ignore everything else about the world. And I'm with you there if that's what you're saying. But in terms of not creating new stuff, I think they absolutely need to create new things because this is such a dead period. It has nothing right now. So if they don't build new things, we don't really have anything.
Yeah, and it's kinda like how when we first started talking about Ryan Reynolds and Mia Goth, they could become pillars. More than likely, Gosling is probably a better candidate because villains are not super recurring in Star Wars, like, they can be, but it's usually for, like, a year or 2 more than like, "Hey, here's your 30-year villain." It's kinda almost like Palpatine's thing, right? Like, that's his thing, he shows up, that's cool, whatever. If that's gotta be what defines him, that he refuses to die or wants things to go his way, sure. Absolutely fine with that. More Ian McDermott, the better. That's what I say. That being said, I will say, like Liam said, again, not putting words in your mouth, Fabrizio, but you do have to create new stories, right? Like 9 kinda ends with like a little bow on top, right? Like, you've already put away the Obi-Wan sorry, not Obi-Wan, the Luke Skywalker lightsaber and the Anakin Skywalker lightsaber on Tatooine, right? She's looking to the future, she's taking the name. Okay. What does that mean next? Well, you have to create something entirely new, right? We don't have anything in the EU like that where they just straight up adopt. It's a very clear blood lineage for the Solo families and for the Skywalker families in EU. Uh, but if you're saying like, hey, stuff like Bloodline, the politics of like the centrists and the populists, kind of being logjam still, who survived, who didn't, right? Like, yeah, absolutely, I want to see some of those characters. You're right. We do need to see some bureaucracy. Did any of it survive? Was it just Lando's message that drew everybody in, or were there more other factors? Or maybe once his initial message brought that, civilian fleet, who like kind of jumped on board and like, oh no, no, this is like what we're supposed to do, Lando. That's cool. You did your thing, but like this is what you need to do to rebuild the galaxy, like stuff like that. That's just how it is with Star Wars. Sometimes Star Wars is messy. It's not always the cleanest, but eventually things do work out. Eventually, things do work out. I think once you make that era and you make some connections, and maybe this is where Filoni will actually be more helpful, more useful, things will get better. I promise you, I will get this era to be defined and fleshed out.
I think we lost me in the stream. Some okay, I'm back. Yeah, I'm with you on a lot of that, and I think building that era, you have to add new things. You have to go in new directions because it needs its own identity. So, as much as J.J. Abrams, Ryan Johnson, they decided to steep the sequels in the past and not make it its own thing, which we talked about that last week, some of the failings of the sequels. And I think one of the overall general failings in the way they set themselves up to not really please anyone is the fact that they steeped it so much in nostalgia and steeped it so much in the past, but then yet didn't make the old characters the main characters. So if you're gonna
Yeah.
like do the old things again, Probably should have made the old characters the main characters. If we're gonna do new stuff, we should make the new characters, but the main characters. But we didn't do either of those things. So I think if they're gonna push forward, obviously Han, Luke, Leia are all dead. If you're going to push forward without the legacy, and I still urge them, please use Mark Hamill while he's still alive. I know he's been saying he's done with Luke. He'll come back if you want to use him as a ghost, but use him as a ghost while you can. Might
Yeah,
as well just get us some more moments with him. I know there's probably logic in moving on and pushing forward, but I think that's a mistake since there's so many people who are underwhelmed by Luke's appearances in the sequels. You might as well just use him and give us, even if it's posthumously, even if it's as a ghost, give us the version of Luke that we were waiting to see in Rise of Skywalker, and they never used him. Give us the version we were waiting to see and got at the end of The Last Jedi, but then only got for like 10 minutes. Give us
yeah,
that
yeah.
version in the future. But anyway, they need to keep building and progressing, so you got to build more. But yeah, thanks for that comment, Fabricio. And I love the shout out to Bloodline because it's one of my favorite Star Wars books and definitely should be used as a touchstone for New Republic politics. Brandon Tran says, what do you guys think of the new actor David Cornsweet's portrayal of Superman and Nicholas Holt's portrayal as Lex Luthor seen in the Superman trailer? So I think in the trailer it looks fine. Again, I can't really comment on either until we see the film. I think David Cornsweet to me looks fantastic as Superman physically, facially. He looks like Superman. He looks great. I just rewatched Christopher Reeve's Superman for like 10th time this weekend. And it was I think David Cornsweet, the design of the costume, all the stuff around him, just it feels the most in that spirit since Christopher Reeve. And I don't really count Brandon Routh because he was supposed to be playing Christopher Reeve, so
Yeah.
it's not really his own thing. So I feel like it's closer to that spirit. The jury's still out for me with Nicholas Holt as Lex Luthor. I feel like purely just because I know Nicholas Holt so well from so many things, it's hard for me to see him as Lex yet. But he's such a great actor that I'm assuming he'll do a really good job. It looks pretty good from what I've seen from the trailers. And I think given time and given a chance to grow into this role, I'll definitely start accepting him as Lex. But can't really judge. I feel like we've seen very little of him in the trailers compared to even Superman. But I want to see more of Superman talking. I want to see more of Superman interacting with people before I really give David Cornsweet my seal of approval or condemn his work because I haven't seen enough. But from the trailers, I would say I'm very excited for the movie, and I think both of them seem to be doing a pretty good job.
Yeah, I mean, like Liam said, we don't know yet, right? Like, a movie is only gonna be understood once you've seen the whole product, and the glimpses that we have gotten, I have been increasingly more excited. I I think one of the biggest things for me that worked was just when he's being interviewed by Lois Lane, he goes from, "Yeah, I'll do it," like, "Sure," and then she's like, "Superman." Miss Lane, like, he gets the voice right, he gets the posture, that's the that was such a big thing in the original Reeves performance that straight out of the comics that I don't understand why was not really carried forward. I get Cavill was a fantastic actor, but it was such a weird choice for him to not differentiate that, right? Like, Superman is him, Clark Kent is the alter ego, right? Like, it is an act, it's a performance, right? He's not a bumbling fool, but you see him, like, walking around with the suitcase and all this and that, and you're like, okay. Yeah. No, that works, and then that interview sequence, that's what finally sold me on him. I'm like, "Oh, okay, this could be pretty good." Yeah, and, the crypto stuff and all that, that's fine, whatever, but, that's just Superman battered at that moment, right? But, yeah, I think it was just that voice change, the posture, everything, right? I'm not saying it has to be, like, the whole, like, change everything and, like, maybe, like, in the '70s, that works a little bit better now, but I do like the balance just from that one little clip. I wanna see if how much more there is. It's such a great choice to me that they kinda are going for, like, this sort of broccoli, fuzzy hair for Clark Kent versus just, like, this is the same exact hairstyle for how he looks like as a Daily Planet reporter, like, that never worked for me, and, I mean, first of all, I love Amy Adams, but she's not Lois Lane. She's really not. Man, seeing everything how Daily Planet was handled, all that, I was like, this is not working for me," right? But what we're seeing so far in the glimpses, like, her interacting with Guy Gardner, she's like, "You don't deserve to wear that uniform because of that hairstyle alone." Like, that's Lois Lane, that's especially, like, animated series Lois Lane. So I'm seeing these things I'm seeing James Gunn like he has done for everything. Take huge inspirations, blend it, make his own. He has a vision, but he always tries to connect it to what is established, what people assume about these characters and all that. And that's what's most exciting for me right now. I really do like what I'm seeing there. Lex, like you said, we don't really know much about, right? He hasn't really said anything, right? We got Lex Luthor in Batman versus Superman. It was just not good. That's not Lex. It really isn't. It never. You can shave his head off, but
It's
it's not
terrible.
Lex. Terrible. Just not Lex. Like, and he's not even supposed to be Lex. Isn't he like supposed to be like Lex Jr. or something? And you're like, okay, like what's the point of that? Like, are you trying to basically
That
like
was a
post
theory, yeah.
yeah, it's like, okay, whatever, like, the point is, like, if you have to start coping like that, then you know that's not the right performance for Lex. Lex should be someone that is a pure capitalist, is always getting on Superman's nerves, but he's capable. There was nothing capable about the version that we saw before. It was just whiny manipulator, right? Jesse Eisenberg, but if he was, playing Mark Zuckerberg, playing Lex Luthor, it just didn't work for me. And it was whiny. It was not there. So everything I'm seeing so far is great. The biggest thing is just making sure for me the Clark and, Lois Lane dynamic works. I think Rachel Brosnahan is supremely underrated as an actress. Obviously, she had Miss Maisel on Amazon and all that, but everything I'm seeing from her, I'm like, "Yes, that's the Lois Lane I remember watching in the animated series, so I remember seeing in Justice League." It's there. That looks really good for me. I'm liking the casting choices so far. Still a little iffy on Guy Gardner, not necessarily because I have anything against Fillion, it's just he's a lot older than some of the Guy Gardner depictions. The hairstyle's phenomenal, but, I wanna see him wear a little bit more of his classic look. I know he's wearing, like, a Max Corp outfit just like Hawkgirl. I wanna see how that plot element is even addressed if it isn't until Peacemaker, season 2 or whatnot. But, yeah, I'm liking everything I'm seeing. I don't love the machete cinematography so much. It does feel a lot like Flash, which is not a great film either. But I think a lot of it is also just seeing something on your mobile phone, seeing it on your TV screen versus seeing it on screen. I hope the color grading is a little bit tweaked, even more so by the time we get to there. But I'm liking everything we're seeing. It feels like a very sci-fi Superman film, which is something that just they tried so hard in Man of Steel and Batman versus Superman, but it just got way too gritty and went away from everything that actually was cool sci-fi concepts that are fundamentally important to the character. So I'm excited. The only thing I could want a little different with Cornsword's Superman so far is that maybe his collar is just a little bit lower instead of like a neck collar. But besides that, I think I've even grown up on the suit a little bit more. I'm like, okay, like when he's posing and all that, it looks pretty good. And if this is a first version, fine by me, right? Like I can't wait for whatever tweaks and everything come. It may not be as beautiful as the Man of Steel version that we got, but I think it's gonna be like the one small quirk about this younger Superman that I can live with because the performances, the portrayals are all there.
I hope so. I hope they're all there. I agree. The Superman Lois is the core relationship for these movies. Like I think for the Reeves films, Superman and Lois carries it. Like it's the whole plot of the second movie is her trying to figure out if Clark and Superman are the same person. Now the first movie, it's their dynamic. It's when they're Clark and Lois, when they're Superman and Lois, it's their chemistry. The way Superman plays off of Lois as a different person than he does when he's Clark. Uh, all of that works really well. So they need to nail that, and it looks like they've got that. I think everything else you can grow into the role. We just have to buy, obviously, the Superman's issues and the things that are fundamentally part of that character's journey are is something that David can carry emotionally, but also uh, from from a human and power perspective. You have to be able to see him carry that weight, that oddness, and like that's something that very underrated about Christopher Reeve is not just the way he differentiates between Clark and Superman, but it's the way he carries himself and his presence, his build. He's so big and he's so physical, and he uses that, and he uses his presence as a god to basically make himself seem like this otherworldly very classically sci-fi character, and so I'd like to see that in this film because this film has a lot of those classic sensibilities as well. So, looking forward to seeing that. Brandon follows up and says, "Corn Sweat 100% nails Superman for underrated actor. He has a mix of Cavill and Reeves for his portrayal." And it looks like that. I definitely think it looks like that, Brandon. I mean, again, hard to really say until we see him in full scenes, but I do think this latest trailer, adding that stuff with Lois, a lot of it does bring out a little bit more of his personality because he's got to have a personality too. And that's again the effortless thing that Reeves does is he brings out this personality in Superman without seeing like a wooden, you know, figure, somebody who's preaching. He's not somebody like that. He's not preaching to you. He's just genuine. And there's like an authenticity about Christopher Reeves that Cavill doesn't necessarily ever get a chance to do, because his version is always so depressed and sad and pulled down by the weight of the world and expectations and all this stuff. And you never get a chance for him to be charismatic and just a genuine guy. And so I want to see that in Corn Sweat. And it seems like we'll get some of that. And since they're going with a little bit younger version here than the Christopher Reeve version, who is, I believe, in his early to mid 30s in the movie, just having watched it, because he's like 18 or something when he goes off to the Fortress of Solitude. And I believe they say he's there for, I want to say it's 10 years or 13 years or something like that at the Fortress of Solitude learning before he shows back up as Superman. So he's pretty old. And I would imagine Corn Sweat's version is supposed to be in his mid 20s. So I think it's a little bit more, it's a little bit younger version. I think definitely supposed to be a little bit inspired by some of the young stuff they do with Superman and maybe the classic 50s Superboy comics, as well as some of the stuff, the good stuff they did with New 52, because definitely the upper half of the costumes a little more inspired by New 52, with the color and that type of stuff. So I don't know, they're taking inspirations from a lot of different things. We'll see where they go, but I hope his portrayal is as good as it kind of looks like it's going to be. And then Brandon also says if Nicholas Hoult does a better job of Lex Luthor than Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Gunn's Superman might be peak like Clancy Brown's Lex in DC Animated Universe and Justice League Unlimited. Nothing's better than Clancy Brown's Lex, but he could get there with time. He will be better than Jesse Eisenberg. Like, I don't know how you feel about Jesse Eisenberg in that comment, Brandon. Like, I can't tell if you're saying that it's a high bar or a low bar to be better than Jesse Eisenberg. But I personally just can't stand Jesse Eisenberg's version of Lex Luthor. Thought it was awful casting when they casted him. And especially because the big rumor at that time, I don't know if you remember, Brandon, but the big rumor at that time, purely just because he was bald and famous for playing a bald actor, was Bryan Cranston. And that would have been amazing. And going from Bryan Cranston to Jesse Eisenberg was such a massive letdown that it just was, he had a huge uphill climb already, but just the fact that his version was so different than anything we've ever seen of Lex, I thought it was genuinely awful. And they just did not understand the character. And it's not really his fault because he's playing what they told him to play, but I don't understand what Zack Snyder was doing with that version of Lex. I really did not like it. And yeah, there were theories out there that it was Lex Jr. and that this version of Lex would end up passing it on to like Bryan Cranston, where you'd have the adult version of Lex, but that never actually came to be, and they doubled down on Jesse Lex throughout the rest of the DC EU's life. So, yeah, disappointing all the way around, but hopefully this makes up for it and we have a great movie here. So we have one more question, obviously, or no, we have two, and we're about to wrap up our stream. So again, last chance for everybody who wants to get on the stream tonight. Send in a question or a super chat, and we will try to get to yours. We can't guarantee we'll get to your question, but if you send in a super chat, we'll definitely get to it before the stream wraps up because we are about at the 2-hour mark. Okay, so Fabricio says, I love The Acolyte, and I strongly think it deserves a new series under another name, expanding the story of Khmer, Venestra, and Palpatine's youth. I do not like The Acolyte at all, Fabricio, but I also am okay with them giving it a second chance under a new name with a new direction, a new creative team, because I think the story has too many open-ended pieces. There are too many things left on the table both lore-wise, we were talking about lore earlier, Fabricio. The lore they set up in the Acolyte to me is stuff that you can't just ignore forever. It has to be answered. The stuff with the Virgins, the twins, bringing May back to the Jedi Order, like all this different stuff that's there. There's so many pieces open that are just nonsensical if you don't ever answer them. Like, yeah, I don't like the Acolyte, and so I'm okay with never touching the story again. But if they wanted to bring it back under a new name, even as somebody who really does not like the Acolyte, I'd be kind of down for that just because they need to answer these questions. But I do want a new creative team. I do want it to have a new focus. I don't want it to be about Osha and May because I just really don't like those characters. I don't want it to be really about anybody from the season one. I think focusing on Kamir and focusing on Plagueis and like the transformation of the show into something with Darth Plagueis and then trying to explain some of the stuff with the Virgins Away via Darth Plagueis, those would be the best ways to alter kind of some of the story and reclaim a little bit of it, enhance a little bit of it, and shift it into something that's more palatable into the Phantom Menace. So I'm with you, even if we don't see eye to eye on our opinions of the Acolyte.
Yeah, I'm a little bit more positive than Liam. Obviously, still very mixed on it. Like I've been saying in the stream, execution was the huge biggest problem. Super short run times for me. The concepts that were there, if you give them 5 more minutes each episode, you probably get something out of that. You probably make the ensemble feel like an ensemble. You probably make these episodes that are clearly split in 2, the Brendock flashbacks and then episode 4 and 5, right? Like if you just made them a little shorter overall, but then added like a proper follow-up episode, I mean, everything probably flows better even if you don't like it. It's just not a well executed show. That's my biggest problem. I I agree. The virgins and everything, once you throw that out there, you're like, okay, you're gonna say something about it? Are May and Osha like two a soul split into two or something? There's some very interesting possibilities that they are throwing out there, but we need to have it finished, right? And it's a shame that, like Liam was saying before, that we can't get these shows get come out back to back seasons. Because if this was already ready to start production by the time season one had ended, maybe they just go along with it and they're like, let's just wrap it up, tweak it as necessary, set up something for like a Plagueis trilogy or something, right? And you don't have to love it, but at least we close all these major questions. There's just so many questions right now that are frustrating, right? So, yeah, I don't know if I would say Sidious per se. I think Sidious could be something that's explored a little later, but get Plagueis. This is the one chance to really explore the mythology of that character. Is Sidious even telling anything right about him? Like, do we really know that? I mean, we have obviously the Plagueis novel from Lucino that you can use as a big basis, but that doesn't necessarily translate 100% into like a movie trilogy. It might make a great TV show, like an Andor, very sophisticated about like working with the banking clan, moving money around, and then blending in some cool things with the Force and what he's doing with Tenebris and all that. But is it something that at full trilogy can handle? Maybe not, right? So, like, whatever they're gonna do is gonna be different. I've already accepted that, but you have to make it focus on Plagueis. If you're gonna talk about breakaway Sith like the beginning of the novel does, yeah, Kymer, 100%. I think Kymer is the best character of that show. I want to understand what happened between him and Vernestra. I wanna understand why Vernestra is like this. It'd be great if you'd find out more about, Ravencroft, the freaking senator, right? He has some great lines, he has some great scenes, but they're all in, like, the last 2 episodes, and you're like, "Why was he not recurring?" It's the same issue I have with Cad Bane, the Book of Boba, where you could have, like, implied him, left signs and clues about him, and then tied in all this Tusken stuff and maybe kept a couple Tusken survivors, right? Like, it's shocking how you're gonna bring him in when he has a lot more potency to his character, and that could work with Vernestra and where she's going through. You could have also blended some cool, interesting things about maybe she's already being influenced by the dark side. Maybe she's under like a spell of some sort, right? Like there's things that you can do to retcon that season one, make Vernestra be like, oh, it's not entirely her choice. What's been happening here? We don't really get that in the Wayseeker novel, so there's still a very open possibility of changing that. Whatever happens to these characters will be changed. I think May and Osha, you still have to finish, but I wouldn't be surprised if you do like another season. Like they're the first two people that get killed off. Right? And then you get once they get killed off, it's a very interesting way they get killed off. You understand they're not exactly like Anakin virgin birth. Their birth is very different, even if it is like not technically from like a man and a woman or something, right? Like there's some very interesting things you could do with the concept of a split soul and the virgins and how that powers it, why Plagueis does or doesn't use it. How does the Force react and doesn't react? Like, there's again, I think there's a lot of great concepts in Acolyte. It's just no execution. Organization's terrible, run times are way too short. It's just it was all there if you really wanted to go for it and make those big swings, but give it runtime. Give it runtime. So even if you don't like it, at least it's understood and explained away by the end of the season. It's not, right? So we'll see what happens, obviously, but I think a Plagueis trilogy makes sense. Probably becomes a Plagueis show, but then how are you gonna get the CGI with how the streaming bubbles burst, right? It has to be movies. So, I think that's where you bring in a Chimera. I think that's where you bring in other Jedi that could have been, been from the High Republic and all that. Elevate a little bit more some obviously some new original characters. No Mundi because I hate the guy just in general, but, you can build up a lot of, like, prequel connections and everything. Tell a story that still is indebted to that novel but is also tied to the High Republic properly, that is tied to whatever the acolyte was trying to say, and you still end the story with the majority of what we already knew and understood from Sidious explaining who Plagueis was and his legend. It's all there to be fixed. It should be a priority to be fixed. Obviously, it seems right now it's the sequels becoming an era that is a little bit more of the priority, and Manoverse obviously coming closer to its close. Well, I think that should be the 3rd priority because that's just a looming question. I don't like looming questions like that that have so much potential to change everything that we understand about Star Wars. If it was like a couple loose threads, like how like that last High Republic book apparently doesn't address
Yeah.
everything from Phase 3, that you can, follow up in other books and stuff like that, sure, that's fine, but this is stuff that changes your perspective on the prequels, changes your perspective on the Force, changes your perspective on the High Republic. Those things need to be addressed.
Absolutely. And they it's like reading a comic book if it sits there for, weeks and you have a cliffhanger ending, they usually address it the next week. It's not something you leave forever. So they gotta address it at some point. But that's gonna wrap up our stream tonight, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. As always, make sure you like the video. If you haven't liked the video, it's your best way to show your support for the channel. It's easy. Just scroll down, hit that like button. We have plenty more content coming out for y'all throughout the rest of the week. Stay tuned for our latest tier list, which will be out this week, as well as a variety of other great content, including shorts 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then polls twice a day, every single day. Thank you so much for watching tonight's stream, everybody. Make sure you come back and join us next week. We appreciate all the support. Lots of new names here tonight. A lot of new people joining us. So we appreciate all the people, the fans who have been here with us from day one. Appreciate all the new people joining as well. Hopefully you guys are enjoying the show and appreciate the content we're trying to give you guys. Thanks so much for watching, and we will see you all next time.